Welcome to Men Pursuing More. I'm your host, Roger Maupin. I believe every man has the potential to push past his limits and strive for something greater. Whether you're a former athlete who is looking for what's next, a professional pushing through the daily grind, or someone simply ready to break through life's toughest challenges, if you're ready to step into the pursuit of something more, your pursuit begins now. All right, welcome back to Men Pursuing More. I'm your host, Roger Maupin, and today we have Craig Volk joining us. So, Craig, before we dive into your story, a few sports questions for you. So the first one, how about your favorite all-time memory of winning a state championship in high school?
Yeah, that's if you're asking me, that's definitely my favorite memory. It's the one that brought me to tears, and I think, like a lot of people say, when you're younger and you see these folks do things on TV, you're kind of like, I want that to be me. And when you actually achieve it, and you, at least in my case, I poured every emotion that I had into that thing. That I'll never forget it.
And that is New Hampton High School, your senior year in Iowa, winning the state championship.
Yep.
All right, your favorite all-time sports team. I know you went to Iowa for, I believe, a year, but I wonder if it's...
Yeah. If you can believe this, growing up in New Hampton, the San Francisco 49ers are unequivocally my favorite sports team. They always have been. I latched onto them probably in the early 80s when Joe Montana and they were winning Super Bowls. And in fact, I've been to 3 Super Bowls, all 3 of them that they've lost. I've been to all 3 of them. So I as big of a Hawkeye fan as I am, I'm a bigger 49ers fan.
All right, there we go. Shout out for the 49ers. And a matter of fact, I grew up in the same hometown, New Hampton. My favorite team is the Dallas Cowboys.
Very nice.
We don't have a professional sports team in Iowa. And then your favorite all-time favorite player of any, like in any sport?
Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice was my favorite athlete growing up. I would say Michael Jordan wasn't far behind, but Jerry Rice was the epitome of, I think, a little bit of my life, right? Not a highly recruited guy, although much more highly recruited than I, but to be kind of a under-evaluated athlete and to turn into what one would argue would be the best receiver to ever play the game. His story resonates with me more than anybody else's.
There it is, another 49er player.
Yep.
Can't go wrong. All right, Craig, let's get into your story and share with the listeners about your journey growing up. I know you grew up in Mason City, Iowa, and you spent your first 8 years there. And then share with the listeners also why the move to New Hampton, Iowa, I think when you were 8 years old.
Yeah, so I was born in Mason City. I actually lived in Fertile, technically, which is just outside of Mason City. And my father was killed in a car accident in December of 1983. And so my mom, they both graduated from New Hampton High School, but my mom was from New Hampton. And so getting back closer to her family, I think for the support that she needed with us kids, I was 8 years old. My sister was 2 years old, and my mother was 3 months pregnant with my brother. I think that support system was a really important thing. I know it was a really important thing for her.
Your journey to New Hampton. So now share with the listeners growing up in New Hampton and just some of the highlights. Also, maybe if there's some challenges along the way growing up in New Hampton.
Yeah, I think probably more highlights as I think about it, in a sense of community, even compared to where I live today, Lakeville, Minnesota, which is a very large community. It's not the same. There's nothing like having 3,000 people in town and selling out the gym every night, whether it's a football game, a basketball game, you name it. That gym was full all the time. And I've not experienced anything since then like what New Hampton had to offer. And in fact, a lot of times at away games, we were filling out those gyms and had more fans there than the locals did. That is just something I'll never forget. And I think if there was any challenge, I think a lot of people who grew up in small towns, it's hard to see a vision of where you can go in the world and what's out there and how you can achieve success, however you want to define success. For me, I didn't see those things. I didn't see the success opportunities as quickly as you might otherwise if you're from a bigger town, but it all worked out just fine.
Share with the listeners I know you went to the St. Joseph Catholic School through, I believe, 8th grade. Is that correct? And
that's correct.
I believe the coach that kind of made an impact on you, the coach there. And then share with the listeners a little bit about your junior year where your team went undefeated, and then your senior year championship. You can share with the listeners about that.
Yeah, the St. Joe's was again, a big foundation, which we'll get into in a little bit, and just some of the coaches that we had, learning to respect coaches, referees, just respect the game. And that carried into high school. We were I don't think we were undefeated my junior year. In fact, I know we weren't, but we were the number one team to go down to the state tournament with the number one seed, and we got beat by a point to Johnston. And that was probably one of the more crushing defeats. I felt like that team that we had was a group of all St. Joe's kids that were starters. It was just a special bond that I think we all had growing up. And to not have won that, it's the one I would have liked to have gotten back. But then certainly everything bad that happens provides motivation for something sometimes better. And we turn around and get back down to the tournament with one loss and ultimately sweep everybody and win the state championship. So that was, just moments that if I could do it all over again, I would.
There it is, the senior year championship. I remember I actually attended that game. I was living up here in the Twin Cities. It came down. I think there was a lot of New Hampton fans that were not just in New Hampton, around the area, like around the Midwest, that came to see your team win that state championship. So congratulations for you and all those that were part of that. So.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate all the people that followed us, because it certainly made our experience a lot more enjoyable than showing up in an empty gym.
Now, share with the listeners your reason for attending the University of Iowa your first year, and then eventually you would transfer to Waldorf, and some of the, let's say, just some of the highlights and maybe some of the challenges along the way these next 4 years.
Yeah, I went through a bit of a struggle because, as I said, I am a huge Hawkeye fan and just always had a desire to play Division I basketball. And while I think probably deep down I knew that I wasn't a Division I athlete, something kept pressing me forward to try to do something that not that many people can do coming out of a small town. I made the decision to walk away from a lot of Division III schools and other junior colleges to walk on and give it a shot and see what I could do. And fortunately, was able to make the team. I was the only walk-on that was not invited back from a previous year to be on the team, that had a moment to just let it settle in. And then the minute we got done, it was go get your medical done and practice starts right away. So it's a lot of pressure. A friend of mine, John Crowett, came down to watch and celebrate with me, which was really special. And it's hard to believe that was 30 plus years ago. But yeah, that was what I wanted to do. And then transitioning, I didn't think I would ever play. And certainly missed the ability of being on the court instead of practicing all the time, and made the move to transfer to Waldorf and play there, and had the two best seasons in school history, made some great friendships and what have you. And I don't regret it. Ultimately, my life followed from there. I met my now wife there, and everything takes shape for reasons.
So two of you met at Waldorf, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
I played basketball and she was playing basketball and volleyball. So that was the common connection.
That's very cool. I did not realize that I knew she was from Iowa, right? She's from Iowa.
My wife is from Britt, Iowa, which is just south of Forest City, not too far away.
Yeah, that's right. And it wasn't at that time period that Waldorf turned to a 4-year college instead of, I remember it used to be a 2-year.
Yeah, so I went through the first class going through summer school, 2 years in a row, where that was the first year that they had a management degree, a finance degree, and a communications degree. So I went to school for business management and finance, and then ultimately they've since become a 4-year school. So they were in that early transition at that time.
So once you graduated, share with the listeners your journey after graduating, and eventually, I know you eventually make your way up to the Twin Cities, and then I know in the financial industry, but share with us before maybe making your way to the Twin Cities, and then kind of your journey, why you came up to the Twin Cities.
I think it comes back to what I said earlier about being in a small town. It's kind of hard to break out and get into a big city. In my mind, Waterloo, Cedar Falls was a big city, and ultimately kind of landed there for a little while. But I just bopped around I think I had 5 jobs in 3.5 years, just different finance jobs between Waterloo, Cedar Falls, and Cedar Rapids, and ultimately was very frustrated and decided I needed to get to a bigger city. So when I was working for GMAC, they had an opportunity to move up to Minneapolis, to just transfer with that company. And I made it there 6 months, and again, found myself frustrated with the pace at which those companies were growing and probably what I wanted to grow internally. I guess I learned that I didn't like working for other people. I didn't like being on someone else's schedule, timeline, pay structure, you name it. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I know I didn't want to work for anybody anymore. And that became very apparent fairly quickly. And then ultimately, I started my business at 24 years old.
Yeah, I remember at that time we had some conversations about that, and also we were playing in the league together, and then you also played some. I know Saturday mornings. I know when you came over the Eastviews. So share with the listeners. Eventually, like you're working for Northwest Mutual, and the kind of discovery agreements, I believe, and some of the success and challenges in your industry at the early stages.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is moving to a city where you have no connections, no family, no nothing. I obviously knew you a bit, Roger, casually, but the challenge was going out before, as I was getting started, these discovery agreements were where you'd sit down with people that you knew and some that you didn't know and just ask them a series of questions and see if they might be interested in actually working with you and becoming a client. And so those discovery agreements are just a way to see if you're willing and willing to go out and actually get out of your comfort zone to call on people. And so that was hard. And then once I got started, it was even harder because on average in our industry, for every 10 people that you call on, you're getting 9 no's. So you're getting told no 90% of the time. And it doesn't sound that bad, really. It's not physically hard, but emotionally and mentally, I've seen some really tough people who are really well connected just completely fold within a matter of months because they can't take the rejection. So the rejection was the hardest part of getting started.
So how does someone in your industry, because people probably would be wondering about this, how do you make it through? Because I think they always talk about that those first 5 years, it's a grind. Well, there was first so many years.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I can tell you that there's some research around it that sort of helps figure out if your personality is wired to make it through, but it's not an exact science either. I can tell you for me, I had enough of those work experiences working in those other jobs that I mentioned earlier. The idea of going back to the corporate world and going through the meetings and all the crap that I just didn't care to do was enough of a driver to me to go, I never want to do that again. And this is my only option. I felt like I was backed into a corner and this was the only way out. I don't think everybody fortunately has that sense of clarity to know that there's nothing, in my mind, there was nothing better around the corner. And so that just kept me always pressing forward, and there was a lot of bad days, don't get me wrong, but that always kept me pressing forward on, I just got to keep my head down. I told my kids the other day that, on Fridays, whenever everybody else would go home to do whatever they were going to do for the weekend, and I was still sitting there on the phone making calls, and I wouldn't let myself leave until I scheduled one more appointment. And I did that for Fridays for weeks and months and until things finally started to happen.
Things definitely started happening. So your business started growing, and then share with the listeners your journey to eventually incorporate and what that means for some of these listeners maybe don't understand that. Incorporate in 2017 and any kind of, I know there's highlights, but any kind of challenges also along the way.
Yeah, I think the gist of it is for a long time, you're a statutory employee for years. You don't really own your book of business, for lack of a better way to think about it. And in 2017, being able to incorporate really means that now you own the book of business that you have. You can set up an S corporation. You can fill out a doing business as. So at that time, it was Volk and Associates. It started to become a little bit bigger than just me as an individual. We started hiring staff and people that we employ, paying benefits and salaries, et cetera. So all that's coming out of my pocket. And it was really just a different sense of, for me, ownership in all the years that I put in is now I've actually got something of real value that I can grow and eventually transition or sell my shares someday. That was a big step. Certainly then, since then, I've taken on a couple business partners. And so now we have 18 people on our team. And it again, just the ability to have ownership in something was as rewarding as I've ever experienced in my adult working life.
You were made for more clarity, more confidence, more impact. At Maupin Coaching, I help high school and college athletes master the mental game and guide men into purpose-driven leadership. Grab the sports book, rock that merch coming soon, and step into more at maupincoaching.com. Share with the listeners now the start of the Stone Arts Advisory and how you just celebrated the 25th anniversary in the industry and just some of the kind of like highlights of some of the achievements, awards along the way, but also just putting together this team, this Stone Arts Advisory team.
Yeah, one of the important parts for me is when I started Volk and Associates was to say, I don't really need my name on this anymore, nor do I want it. I wanted to have a company that was going to have a name that was going to last generations and generations far beyond me even being alive, hopefully. And so I wanted to get to more of a neutral name that represented something that was solid and structurally sound. It represents the Stone Arch Bridge. It represents generational wealth. That bridge represents moving people from one generation to the next. So there was a lot of thought that went behind it. I'm not one that's big on accolades, but I have been fortunate to be part of these things called the Forum, which is the top 1% of advisors in the company out of, I don't know, some 7 or 8,000. I've done that 15 out of the 25 times. Recently, in the last few years, we've been fortunate to be nominated by Forbes as the best in state advisors, et cetera. And that's important to me. And I think, but probably the most important, two most important things to me are the lives that we're impacting. We have something like 1,400 households, something like $3 billion of life insurance in force that we have paid out to families over time when people pass away, et cetera. And we also employ 15 people that we make sure their families are taken care of and they can bring a good income home and grow professionally. And all of those things those latter two have become far more important to me than what my income is or what our company value is worth. It's the lives that we're really making a difference in.
I appreciate you sharing that. It was this year, right? 2025, where you had the 25th anniversary?
I was. Yep. I started in April of 2000. And so April of this year, 2025, was my 25th anniversary. The turn of a century.
Shout out, 25 years, Craig. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Share with the listeners what advice you would give to a financial planner as like he or she starts their journey, and why a listener would consider Stone Arch Advisory. You already shared some things. Why? What advice would you give to someone starting off?
Well, I think find those people around you that are wildly successful, that have been through all of the things, and interview them and spend time with them. And it probably gets into a little bit of mentorship here, but mentors are so critical to helping you get through these trying times and get through all of the junk that this business can throw at you. So to me, that's a really big one. I don't know how else you do it, to be honest with you. I think the other thing is I started calling on people that were my age for a while, and then I started calling on people that were 20 plus years older than me. And so now I feel like I've retired hundreds of times because I've got clients that were as old as 104. I've got clients that are in their 20s. I've got some technically clients that are babies. And we have seen about everything that can happen over the lifespan of somebody, from birth to death and everywhere in between. And I think that perspective of knowing what people will experience when they get older, and the perspective of what people experience when they're younger, or if they want to pass money down to another generation, how that all should work. We have just been through so many of these scenarios that I would argue we're as good as anybody at it. I'd put our firm up against anybody in the country at that.
And I wanted to ask you a couple of questions that went, and you had mentioned this earlier about you had been in some other industries, and then you got into the area of like financial plan. I think you're already kind of in the financial planning, but in the industry of, okay, I want to do this on my own. So what advice would you give someone when people just jump right into the financial planning and all of a sudden they haven't been in any other industries like you did? And it creates that drive. And then also maybe touch a little more on mentorship, maybe some key people, if you want to share, that have been really key players in your life as like mentors.
Yeah, I think getting into the industry, if this is all you've ever known, there's not a lot to keep you here, if you will. So for example, with my son, he's working at Amazon this summer, and he does want to do the internship, but I've been real proactive in telling him, I'd like you to go try some other stuff. He's delivering packages at Amazon, and he hates it. He just hates it. But I want him to do it because I want him to hate some things enough so that drives him to go do the other things that actually he can be more successful at. And I just feel if you have the ability to do some things that you just really don't like, whether that's forced or otherwise, I think it pushes you away from those careers and allows you to get into something else. I don't know. That was my own personal experience, and I think it's a big deal. You probably did the same, Roger, as I did, picking rock and baling hay and doing all that stuff. I loved doing it at the time. It taught me hard work and all that, but I also knew that I never wanted to do it again. So I think that's really important, is try a few things, cure the curiosity before you commit, because this is an industry, it's an incredible industry, but it is a long-term industry. If you're going to do it, you're in it for the long haul. It's not get in, get out, get in, get out. So that would be my advice there. I think as it relates to mentorship, I've had some incredible mentors. Literally, there are two people in my world at work that mentored me, Mark Hiram and George Christ. George is now retired. And it solely for these two guys, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't still be here. I'd have been gone. In fact, about 18 months into the career, I was considering going back to Iowa. I was going to move back there. And these guys gave me some really good advice. They said, if you just stay here and let us teach you how to do this, you'll be so good at it that you could move yourself anywhere in the country, move your family, any city in the country, and you'll be able to create whatever business you want. But you got to stay here to learn it. And that was the one of the better single pieces of advice that was ever given to me. I think the second one was, you probably remember this, but a guy named Ray Riesland, who was the head coach at New Hampton football for a number of years when I was in high school. And he said to me, it's a funny thing about life. If you refuse to accept anything but the best, you very often get it. And it still is the only real thing that resonates with me today. And in fact, I put it on a pizza box in my bedroom when I was growing up, but it is still the one motto that I live by.
I love that. And I'm a firm believer in mentorship. Always have been, always will be. And there's a lot of books I know written about that, but just see how the impact it's had on you and just some of the key players in your life. So we talked about some kind of best advice. Shout out to the coach from New Hampton. And so when have you had the most, if you want to say, personal or professional growth in your life, and what kind of caused that growth?
Yeah, I'm going to try to tie this all in full circle because I was reading this question the other night and I'm thinking, when haven't I had professional growth? I almost would flip the question around because it seems like it's constantly happening. But this goes all the way back to when I was probably in fifth or sixth grade on through eighth grade. Bob Galligan and John Winter taught us some intensity, discipline, the will to win in ways that I can't thank them enough. So there's that part of it. That was like one little part of my life. And then Kevin Kennedy came in to be our coach in eighth grade. And he taught me a bit of honesty. He basically said to me, if you want to play basketball and you really like it, you better learn how to dribble and you better be the best dribbler on the court or you'll never play in high school. And that's a tough, I don't know. He doesn't even remember saying it because I actually asked him about it a few years ago, but I never forgot it. And it was what fueled my ability to be the point guard that I was growing up. And then by the time I was in junior and senior in high school, Scott Hoagland, he gave me freedom. He asked me how I wanted to be coached. I told him, you just need to tell me once and you never need to tell me again. But he gave me the freedom to do things on the court that now that I've been a coach and I've saw my kids go through sports. A lot of coaches don't. They pull kids back. They rein them in. So long-winded answer to say that those guys really set a tremendous foundation for me. And then it gets into just my mom and watching the strength that she's had over the years. Think about the situation she was in, being a single mom with a kid on the way, much less anything else. Just her strength that I guess it didn't go unnoticed. And then, like I said, George and Mark, the two guys that believed in me in my career, probably before I believed in myself. And I always feel like I'm professionally developing. I'm always pushing myself to learn more. It's an industry that learning never stops. If you want it, it's always there. I'm taking a designation here in a few months that it's a private wealth advisor for high net worth families. And it's got tax and estate planning and all these things, but it's a short-winded answer to say, just trying to always get better at my craft. And I think that this career allows you to do that. So it's just my professional growth path hasn't stopped up until this point, and I don't anticipate it ever stopping.
It's that kind of pursuit of excellence or that upward journey, attempting to reach perfectionism. We're never going to reach perfectionism, but that pursuit of excellence and that upward journey. We're going to have our moments at times, but we want those moments to be temporary. We don't want them to set us back for years.
Yeah. And I think to your point, it's easy to get set back. It almost takes some practice to go, okay, I got to step back. How do I get through this? How do I go through this wall as opposed to over or around it? And then it's a muscle that you have to exercise. I do believe everybody has the capacity to exercise it. Once you do it a couple of times, it starts to become the norm.
Appreciate that. Craig, now I know you shared a few people that have had, with some people that have had an influence in your life, but any other shout outs you want to share about any other influential people in your past or present time that have made an impact on you?
Nobody's coming to mind. I think I mentioned everybody already, but I think if I were going to reiterate what I said, it's just these folks, 6 of them, 7 of them, most of them probably don't know that they've had as profound of an impact on me as they have. And excuse me, but it gets me actually choked up a little bit because it's real. They just did. They saw something in me that I know I didn't see in myself right out of the gate, and helped me build some type of inner strength that, it's made me who I am today, frankly, and I'm just super thankful for that.
The cool thing about it, Craig, they're going to be able to hear it on this podcast, because sometimes you don't always have the chance, or you maybe share it with them. They just maybe don't understand, or wow, I didn't realize it made an impact. But for them to hear your story and hear the impact it had on your life, a shout out to all of them. So appreciate you sharing that, Craig. A few final thoughts that you want to leave with. I know this is Men Pursuing More, with men as they continue on their journey, personally and professionally, but also we have a lot of women kind of listening to this podcast too, but those men, but also those maybe going into the financial industry, those looking to start a business. What are a few final thoughts that you want to leave?
It's a great question. I think what came to my mind, Roger, was that the journey just really doesn't end. I don't ever think it's too late to try something new. I think if you're someone, man or woman, who's later in their career, I marvel at you a bit, Roger, in terms of how I've seen your development and what you've done and what you're doing on this podcast is just incredibly cool. And the energy you have around it. And I think it's, number one, it's a testament to someone who's been through a lot of different things in life. And that's probably as energized as I've ever seen you as long as I've known you. So I think you're a bit of an example of that. I think if you're on the other end of the spectrum and you're a younger person, again, find someone who's done it that can get you out of your own head in ways that you might be thinking, because we're a product of how we grew up to a degree. We're a product of what our parents might have told us. And I'll give you a great example. One of my cousins said to me years ago, he said, "Why did you decide to go to college?" And I said, it was just always something that my mom encouraged me and always thought that I would want to do. And I said, "Why do you ask me that?" And he said, because his parents told him he should just go get a job after college or get a job after high school and not go to college. And I said, that's just a product of what somebody who has influence over you told you, because they maybe didn't see life the same way, or they never really went on beyond high school. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's a whole big world out there and a lot of opportunities, and you're only as good as the people you're around. And I think I said this too when we talked the other day. Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. That there is a direct correlation on who you spend your time with and where you're going to get to in life. And like I said, that mentorship and it's happening to people, I think, is really important. And I jotted down a note here that there's a song by Cody Johnson called "Till You Can't." And it's a country song. I'm a big country guy. And I'll just paraphrase one of the parts of their frame, but it says, "If you've got a dream, chase it, because a dream won't chase you back." And I just don't give up on those dreams, because you get one shot at this life to do it. You get one shot to do it right. Make the most of it.
Craig, thank you so much for your willingness to share. And where can listeners find you and follow your story?
The biggest part is we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook under Stone Arch Advisory Group or stonearchadvisorygroup.com. We've got a website, etc. All my contact information is on there. I think more importantly, a lot of my son's friends come to me for advice. They call me. They've known me. I've coached a lot of them growing up. And I'm always, when somebody calls me and needs advice like that, I don't ever say no. And so it's not about whether you want to do business with us. It's really about, can I pay it forward? Can I take all the things I've learned and the things I continue to learn from others, et cetera, and can I pay that forward to someone else? So that's the most important thing to me.
All right, that's a wrap with Craig Volk, and I want to thank you for being part of Men Pursuing More podcast.
Thanks for what you're doing here, Roger. This is awesome. Really do appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for listening to Men Pursuing More podcast. Don't forget to follow us at moffincoaching.com.